Welcome everyone to Buddha's Center. My name is Jeff Allen. Once again, we're looking at Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment. We're in such an important section, a section that I think a lot of us just read and say, yeah, I get it, and then go through rather quickly because we want to get to some of the fancier philosophical stuff, but we know that the section that we're in, the teaching shared in common with beings of small capacity, and specifically the section that deals with the 10 non-virtuous activities, is a section that we have to know and have to implement in our lives and really make that section who we are in terms of our ethical behavior and our, the things that we abandon, if we wish to achieve concentration or shamatha, or if we wish to achieve special insight, that is able to actually cut that root of cyclic existence once we convert it from an inference into a direct perception. So I'm really, really happy that we're spending as much time as we are on the teaching shared in common with beings of small capacity in the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, because, as we all know, Khyentse Geshe Wandak chose to make this section and this part of the teachings such a main emphasis through all the years that I was with him. And we know that Khyentse Geshe Wandak, surely being known as one of the great Madhyamaka scholars, could have shared much more difficult philosophical information with us. But I was looking at the teaching, as I had said before, that he gave to us on Atisha's Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment. And right in the first couple teachings he gives, he does like a disclaimer. I was reading the transcript, and Rinpoche says, I know I spend a lot of time on this introductory material, but I believe this is what will really help you to cultivate the path, to change your minds. And I've never forgotten that because it's been such an emphasis in my life. And I, as decades, as now I'm 25 going into 30 years into this, I see, how important in terms of my behavior it is, if I want to concentrate well, or if I want to, be able to study and pay attention to it. If my mind is mixed up with all kinds of things and regrets and, wishings I hadn't, there's not really a lot of space there for much else. And when I try to put the much else in there, I find that it doesn't really stick. So this section where we learn how to behave at an introductory level, which seems so obvious at times until you start to think of it as an active engagement of ethics that abandons these non-virtues, it can seem just rote. So before we get into any further commentary, let's get into a mental state that's a little calmer, a little more realistic, one that we can truly hear these teachings, set a good motivation from, try to get the things that I was just talking about cleared out a bit. Normally we come to the teaching, we have so much attachment in our minds because we're running towards attractive objects or anger, aversion in our minds because we're pushing away things we find unattractive. And while we're doing all of that, our mind is so disturbed. And if we're not doing that, we're at least actively sitting in a state of ignorance where we grasp at things incorrectly. And we're raring and ready to go towards things we, like as fast as we can. And to run away from things that we dislike as fast as we can because of this ignorance that grasp at the I and phenomena as being truly established. So let's calm our minds down and try to get to a place where we aren't any of the three faulty pots we've gone over, where we can set our motivations to recognize that we, like a patient, are ill. We're ill with ignorance. We're sleeping right now. A Buddha has woken up. What is a Buddha woken up from? The sleep of ignorance. And right now, we're sleeping. We're ignorant. And, our mind is so corrupt by that. In order for us to move forward, we have to try to somehow or another change that state of mind that's so actively wrong all of the time. Again, not to get distracted, but let's get into the 7-point Vairocana posture that we've gotten into so many times before. And this will allow us to calm our minds down again and to really grow a virtuous state of mind. We'll begin 7-point Vairocana posture. Most important, keep your back straight. You can look up what the 7-point Vairocana posture is if you're not familiar with it. We're going to be breathing now in to calm ourselves down through our nose, bringing the breath all the way to the top of the breath and gently turning it around. And as we exhale, we're going to count 1. And we're going to do these cycles of breath and increase the number. And our focal point will only be the breathing in, the breathing out, the counting, and we're going to add an additional focal object in the space in front of us, about an arm length away. We're going to imagine about thumb size at the kind of height of our eyes, arm's length away, height of our eyes, thumb size, Buddha Shakyamuni. Beautiful, three-dimensional. Anyone who's not familiar, Buddha Shakyamuni is right behind me with His Holiness the Dalai Lama right below. So this is the image. If you don't have one that you can imagine in the space in front of you. And you're doing this with your mental consciousness. So we can get familiar with an image by looking at it, over and over again with our eyes. But eventually, our meditation isn't done with our physical senses. Our meditation is done with our mental consciousness, our mind. So we are going to our mental consciousness in terms of mind. So we're going to really try to have this entire meditation be going on in our mind in terms of the focal object of Buddha Shakyamuni in the front generation and the breathing in and breathing out and the counting. So let's focus on that for a short period of time and just get our minds to a more neutral state. We're so fortunate to be able to focus on such a holy being who's given us such holy instructions. A being who's gotten rid of all the afflictive obstructions and obstructions to omniscience, only has excellent qualities, has no negative qualities. This is a being that we will become when we wake up. When we wake up from the sleep of ignorance, we will no longer have the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience. Because we have Buddha nature, we will wake up. We have the maturing Buddha nature, which means our mind can mature. Our mind can become that pure mind, even though right now it's defiled and sullied. These stains are adventitious and can be removed, just like the Buddha removed the stains in his mind. We're so fortunate the Buddha has so much compassion to show us exactly how to do that. Now imagine that from Buddha Shakyamuni, the static image that you're imagining, the entire merit field explodes into the space in front of you. Imagine all the holy gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas in the space in front of you. Imagining Kensur Geshe Wandak, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Geshe Lobsang Gompo, all these holy beings, Demalocha Rinpoche, who've come to serve us and come to teach us, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, Umzala Geshe Aga, Geshe Mala Tenzin Ladran La, Ani Tupten Chodron. We're so fortunate to have these beings who've spent so much time and cared so much to practice so hard. Holy beings like Geshe Dorje Damdu and Jeffrey Hopkins and Lama Alan Wallace, imagining any being in the space in front of you that you consider kind, compassionate, and holy. Buddha Shakyamuni all the while there, smiling and so happy that we're here today. Imagine the beings of the extensive deeds lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Lord Maitreya and Asanga and Basu Bandhu and Dignaga and Dharma Kirti and Vimuktasena and Haribhadra and Shakyaprabha and Gunaprabha, imagining all these holy beings who help us to understand the grounds and paths, that holy text, the Abhisama Alamkara, that we can understand, and that by understanding that holy text, we will know exactly what's necessary to do to become enlightened, just like these holy beings. Those texts on logic that we've been so blessed to hear by Dignaga and Dharma Kirti and so forth. Those texts on the Vinaya we've been so blessed to hear Gunaprabha and Shakyaprabha have blessed us with. And those texts, as I said, on the Abhisama Alamkara that Haribhadra and Vimuktasena have been so kind to show us with a light so bright what the meaning of these 70 topics are within this great text. We're so fortunate for this extensive deeds lineage that we've had so much experience with by getting teachings from His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Khyentse Geshe Wandak. Imagine in the space in front of you also the profound view lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Manjushri and Nagarjuna and Buddhapalita and Aryadeva and Chandrakirti and Shantideva and Kamalashila and Baba Vega and Chandarashita, all these holy beings who've shown us how to understand that subtle Madhyamaka view and all its brilliance, a view that we would never ever come upon ourselves, that's so subtle and difficult to understand, the lack of objective existence, the lack of inherent existence of all phenomena that the Buddha taught in the second turning of the wheel of Dharma. Imagine those holy beings that we've been so blessed to hear the teachings of, and that lineage that's so unbroken landed in our laps because Khyentse Geshe Wandak and His Holiness the Dalai Lama have been so kind to us. Imagine those beings, imagining Salimpa and Lama Atisha on both sides who've combined these lineages. Imagine the lineage of blessings and practice where we see Saraha and Matripa and Tilopa and Naropa and Marpa and Milarepa and Gampopa, those holy beings who show us the nature of the mind, who show us the 6 yogas of Naropa. We're so fortunate to understand what these things mean and who these beings are because of the kindness of our lamas. Imagining Drone Tompa and the Kadampa lineages and all the holy beings of the Nyingma Kagyu, Sakya, and Galup order in front of you, Padmasambhava and the Karmapas and Sakya Panditas, and imagining Lama Tsongkhapa and Kirtapje and Jelsapje and Basuchuji Jetson and Jayan Sheba and Janja Ripi Dorje and Gonchu Jimmy Wombo, all these holy beings we have such an experience with. Even though we may not know who they are, we've heard their teachings. And the Bodhisattva Guntu Sampo, all these holy beings. Imagine the deities of the highest yoga tantra, yogic tantra, performance tantra, action tantra, all these holy tantric deities that show us the 4 classes of tantra, show us how to transform these desires that we have at 4 different levels into actual pathways. We're so fortunate to have these teachings in this world. Imagining the 35 Buddhas and all the protector deities, the small scope, medium scope protector, imagining Vaishravana and Dharmapala and Mahakala and Palden Lama, all these holy Dharma protectors in the space in front of us. Now imagine that because you know the only way to be fearless and the only way to have infinite happiness is to become a Buddha. You know that you're here today for that reason, because you want to be able to fulfill all of your needs. But in order to fulfill all of your needs, you also have to be willing to fulfill all sentient beings' needs and put others' needs before your own. So we know that that holy path of the Bodhisattva is the only pathway that leads to complete Buddhahood, the only pathway that once you generate bodhicitta, you become a bodhisattva, the only door into the Mahayana, that pathway that leads to the removal of the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience. Imagine now that out of great love and compassion that you have for everyone, you bring them all here. Imagine that you bring all the beings of the 6 realms of cyclic existence here in order for them to listen to the teachings, have the wisdom arisen from hearing, analysis, and meditation. That same thing that you need so much, that you have to have in order to be free. You bring them here so that they can have that same wisdom so that they can be free as well. Imagine you bringing all the hell realm beings, the 8 hot hell, the 8 cold hell, the surrounding hells, those beings that are so cold, those beings that are so hot, those beings that are so tortured over and over and over again because of their minds. Imagine that you're bringing them all here, and just for a moment that torture has ceased so that they can actually listen to the teachings. Those hell beings can just have a little bit of peace so that they can hear the answer to all the solutions. And we know that Buddha Shakyamuni generated the mind that aspires to enlightenment first, generated bodhicitta in the hell realm. And we imagine that we're bringing all these beings here so they can be just like Buddha Shakyamuni, the hungry ghost beings who have knots in their throats and mouths that are so small and stomachs the size of mountains that crave so much, that suffer so badly. Imagine bringing them all here and just giving them enough peace to be able to listen to this teaching. Bringing all the animals here, the animals that dwell in the oceans, how cold they are, how dark it is. Imagine they're so full of fear, and you're just taking that fear. You're giving them the generosity of fearlessness. You're taking that fear away just for a moment so they can hear all the things that they need to hear. Those beings who are on the land and in the ground, in the sky, all of the bugs. We know how cold it was the other night. Imagine the amount of suffering that went on in the animal world. And imagine that you're bringing all of those animals here right now in order to hear exactly what's necessary to never have to experience fear again, never have to be a slave or a servant again, as so many animals are, never have to be so afraid that something bigger is going to eat them any minute again, if they can figure out how to engage in these pathways which bring about fearlessness and infinite happiness. And you've brought them all here in order to be able to be free, in order to not have to experience those sufferings that are so gross and so seen by our own eyes. Imagine you bring all the humans here, all the humans in the varying forms. We know there's so many varieties of beings with varieties of minds. And when we're engaging in virtue that gives rise to happiness, it's because of meeting with the Dharma in a previous time and having some habituation with that. And we know that the non-virtues which give rise to suffering and the negativities that sentient beings engage in are just from a deluded mind, the same deluded mind that I have, that I need to purify. So imagine you bring every single human being here in order to not be under this kind of master of delusion, this master of deception, that the grasping at the eye and phenomena as being truly established that creates the self-cherishing attitude is. That self-cherishing attitude, that self-centered behavior that we all think will bring us happiness but never brings us anything but suffering. Imagining bringing all the humans here, imagining bringing all the demigods here, bringing all of the gods here, the gods of the desire realm, gods of the form realm, gods of the formless realm, all of those beings. You say, wake up, understand you're still in cyclic existence. You have pervasive compounded suffering. Even if you're at the peak of cyclic existence, please listen so carefully, because this is the only thing, this is the only medicine that will cure our illness. We all, as I was beginning to say at the beginning, have the illness of the grasping at the eye and phenomena as being truly established. We're asleep with the sleep of ignorance. We recognize that the teacher is like a doctor who's come to tell us, diagnose our sickness, to tell us exactly what to do about it. That the teacher is this, in this manner, a doctor, and that the Dharma is like medicine. That the doctor says, oh, this is what's wrong, that's what's wrong, this is the medicine that you must take. And it becomes our responsibility to take that medicine. It becomes our responsibility to recognize how important it is, how wonderful the Buddhas are, incredible these beings are that we will want to become so badly, and how different we are from them. We are ill, they are not. We see the difference so clearly. And from recognizing how wonderful this whole thing is, not wanting the Dharma to leave the world, and knowing that we're taking part right now in that, not letting the Dharma leave the world. The Dharma has to be within the minds of beings in order to be present. And we're being part of that process right now. So imagine all the beings are here around you, the bodhicitta field. Imagine the merit field of all the holy gurus, Buddhas, and bodhisattvas are in the space in front of you. So happy, smiling, we're finally doing something that will allow us to become happy. And we're not doing something that will allow us to become sad. And all the gurus, Buddhas, and bodhisattvas want is for us to become Buddhas. There's a pledge that the Buddhas make that until there are no sentient beings left, the Buddha works and works spontaneously. And all the gurus, Buddhas, and bodhisattvas, the Buddhas are working spontaneously with great compassion and perfect wisdom, perfect love, perfect compassion, perfect skillful means, and perfect power for all sentient beings, and will do so until samsara ends. Now, to set our motivations, imagine that we're listening to this holy poem, you could call it, or text, you could call it, called The 37 Practices of the Bodhisattva by Gyaltse Tome Zampo, the great Bodhisattva Tome Zampo, who you hear brought a fox around with him everywhere he went. There was usually a really wild, mean animal, and it would be so calm and kind of sit in his lap. And everyone would be so amazed that such a wild animal could be at such peace. And everywhere Tome Zampo went, the great Bodhisattva, all the animals would be at peace. And I think of Rinpoche, Kensar Geshe Wandak, when I hear stories like this, and we think of that picture of the 4 pit bulls, that beautiful black and white picture at his feet, completely subdued, and how all the animals and beings around Rinpoche would just react, and just it would seem so, just a harmonious environment was created by the blessing of his great mind, by the blessing of the bodhicitta, that he clearly showed us, that renunciation he clearly showed us, that correct view he showed us, that correct view that allowed him to understand that cherishing others is more important than himself. And without understanding emptiness, it's almost impossible to really generate a heavy-duty compassion for others, because we won't see this mess that we're in that's causing their mess, and we'll always have this bias and think that, they're the problem, not the afflictions are the problem. So let's read this holy text. Sometime maybe we'll do a better biography of Gyaltse Tome Zampo. But His Holiness the Dalai Lama has a great commentary, very short text on this if you want to know more about it. Okay, 37 Practices of Bodhisattva by Gyaltse Tome Zampo. Namo Loke Teshvarya. You see that all phenomena neither come nor go. Still you strive solely for the benefit of being. Supreme Guru and Protector Avalokiteshvara, to you I continually bow with body, speech, and mind. The perfect Buddhas, the sources of benefit and happiness, arise from practicing the genuine Dharma, which in turns depends on knowing how to practice. So I will explain the Bodhisattva practices. Now that you have obtained this precious human birth, the great boat so difficult to find, in order to free yourself and others from the ocean of samsara, listening, reflecting, and meditating with diligence day and night is the practice of a bodhisattva. Passion towards friends churns like water, hatred towards enemies burns like fire. Through the darkness of ignorance, one forgets what to adopt and what to reject. To abandon one's homeland is the practice of a bodhisattva. Giving up inhospitable places, mental afflictions gradually decrease. With no distractions, virtuous activities naturally decrease. When mind becomes clear, conviction in the Dharma is born. Therefore, seeking solitude is the practice of a bodhisattva. Friends and relatives acquainted for a long time will separate. Possessions gained with exertion will be left behind. Consciousness, a guest, will leave the guest house of the body. To let go of this life is the practice of a bodhisattva. When due to friendship with someone, the 3 poisons increase, degrading the activities of listening, reflecting, and meditating, and destroys loving kindness and compassion. To give up such a friendship is the practice of a bodhisattva. When relying on someone, your negativities diminish, your positivity qualities grow like a waxing moon. To cherish such a spiritual friend more than your own body is the practice of the bodhisattva. Themselves captives in the prison of samsara, whom can the worldly gods protect? Therefore, to seek refuge in the three jewels, who do not betray you, is the practice of a bodhisattva. The suffering of the lower realms, so difficult to bear, is what the Buddha taught to be the fruit of negative actions. Therefore, even at the cost of your life, never commit negative actions, is the practice of a bodhisattva. Happiness in the three realms, like dew on a blade of grass, is subject to instantaneous fading away. To strive for the supreme state of liberation that never wavers is the practice of the bodhisattva. From beginningless time, your mothers have cherished you. If they suffer now, what good is your own happiness? Therefore, in order to liberate an infinite number of sentient beings, cultivate bodhicitta is the practice of a bodhisattva. All suffering comes from yearning for your own happiness. The perfect Buddhas are born from the intention to benefit others. Therefore, to truly exchange your own happiness for the suffering of others is the practice of a bodhisattva. Even if someone driven by excessive desire steals all your wealth or incites someone else to steal it, to dedicate to this person your body, possession, and all your virtues of the three times is the practice of a bodhisattva. If someone cuts off your head, even when you have not done the slightest wrong, through the power of compassion, to take their misdeeds upon yourself is the practice of a bodhisattva. Should someone slander you and proclaim it in a billion worlds, in return with a loving heart to proclaim their good qualities is the practice of a bodhisattva. If in the midst of a crowd someone exposes your hidden faults and abuses you for them, to bow to them with deep respect, seeing them as a spiritual guide, is the practice of a bodhisattva. If someone whom you cherish as dearly as your own child takes you for an enemy, then like a mother who loves her sick child, to love that person even more is the practice of a bodhisattva. Even when someone who is your equal or inferior, driven by arrogance, seeks to disparage you, to place them on the crown of your head with the same respect as you would accord your guru is the practice of a bodhisattva. Though gripped by acute poverty and constantly scorned by others, stricken by terrible illness and possessed by evil spirits, to take upon yourself the negativities and suffering of every being, and never to get discouraged is the practice of a bodhisattva. Though you may be famous and prominent, someone to whom others bow, though you amass riches like that of the god of wealth, to see that worldly splendor has no essence, and thus to be without ignorance is the practice of a bodhisattva. If you have not pacified the enemy of your own anger, combating outer opponents will only make them multiply. Therefore, with the army of loving kindness and compassion, to tame your own mind is the practice of a bodhisattva. Sensual pleasures are like salt water. The more you partake of them, the more your craving will increase. Therefore, when something arouses attachment, to abandon immediately is the practice of a bodhisattva. All appearances are your own mind, and if mind itself primordially transcends all mental fabrications, knowing this and to remain free from apprehending the signs of subject and object is the practice of a bodhisattva. When you encounter objects that please your mind, like rainbows in the summer season, though they seem beautiful, not to view them as real and to give up attachment to them is the practice of a bodhisattva. All suffering is like the death of your child in a dream. To take such delusive appearance as true, how exhausting. Therefore, whenever you encounter unpleasant circumstances, to see them as deceptions is the practice of a bodhisattva. If those who aspire to enlightenment willingly give up their bodies, what need is there to mention material objects? Therefore, with no hope or reward of benefit, to give with generosity is the practice of a bodhisattva. If lack of discipline prevents you from benefiting yourself, then your wish to benefit others is just a joke. Therefore, to observe discipline with no longing for worldly existence is the practice of a bodhisattva. For a bodhisattva who seeks a wealth of virtue, every perpetrator of harm is like a precious treasure. Therefore, without feeling irritation towards any, To cultivate patience is the practice of a bodhisattva. If Shravakas and Prachika Buddhas who strive for their benefit alone exert efforts as if to extinguish a fire burning on their heads, to cultivate joyous effort, the wellspring of positive activities, is the practice of a bodhisattva. Special insight, perfectly endowed with shamatha, completely conquers all afflictions. Knowing this and cultivating meditative concentration that transcends the four formless states is the practice of a bodhisattva. The practice of the first five perfections, but without wisdom cannot achieve perfect enlightenment. Equipped with skillful means and cultivating the wisdom of non-conceptualizing the three spheres is the practice of a bodhisattva. If you do not analyze your own faults, you might put on a dharmic facade while behaving in a non-dharmic way. Therefore, to continually analyze your faults and then discarding them is the practice of a bodhisattva. If compelled by your own afflictions, you speak of the faults of other bodhisattvas, you yourself will degenerate. Therefore, never citing the faults of those who have entered the Mahayana path is a practice of a bodhisattva. Desire for gain and services lead to mutual arguments, and activities of listening, reflection, and meditating decline. Therefore, to relinquish attachment to the households of friends, relatives, and benefactors is the practice of a bodhisattva. Harsh words disturb the mind of others and degenerate a bodhisattva's conduct. Therefore, to give up harsh and unpleasant speech towards others is the practice of a bodhisattva. Once you become accustomed to afflictions, they are hard to undermine with antidotes. Therefore, with the remedial weapons of mindfulness and introspection, to forcefully eliminate afflictions such as attachment, the moment they arise, is the practice of a bodhisattva. In brief, wherever you are and whatever you do, always examine the state of your mind. Continuously working for the welfare of others is the practice of a bodhisattva. To dedicate the merits thus accumulated through these efforts towards enlightenment with the wisdom free of concepts of the three spheres, in order to eliminate the suffering of all infinite beings, is the practice of a bodhisattva. By relying on the words, so that's the 37th stanza. By relying on the words of genuine masters, I explain the meanings taught in the sutras, tantras, and treatises in the form of these 37 practices of a bodhisattva to benefit those who wish to train on the bodhisattva path. Because my intelligence is less and my learning is meager, I lack linguistic skills to please the scholars. Yet since they are based on sutras and on the teachings of the genuine masters, I believe these practices of a bodhisattva are flawless. Nevertheless, since the vastness of bodhisattva conduct is difficult to fathom by someone like me with an inferior intellect, I pray to the genuine masters to consider with patience all my flaws such as contradictions, incoherence, and so forth. By the virtue of the merit gathered here, and by the power of conventional and ultimate bodhicitta, may all sentient beings become like the benefactor, Avalokiteshvara, who dwells neither in the extreme of samsara nor in that of solitary peace. Wow. Almost I can go home now. These holy beings all are saying the same thing. There's not new material we need to seek out. It's so clear what we need to do. This great bodhisattva is so clear exactly what needs to happen. And I feel so fortunate that we have these teachings in our world, and that Khyentse Geshe Wandak showed us the mirror of the Dharma and said, this is the mirror of the Dharma. This is it. In brief, wherever you are, whatever you do, always examine the state of your mind. What did the Buddha say? Abandon non-virtue. Engage in perfect virtues. Subdue your mind. This is the teaching of the Buddha. We're so fortunate that we know what the great Bodhisattva Tome Sampo is talking about in here. When we go through those guided meditations on the Four Noble Truths and the different realms and the four form realms and four formless realms, we know what they're talking about here. It says, knowing this and cultivating meditative concentration that transcends the four formless states is the practice of a bodhisattva. And we know that Buddha's last two teachers were in the last two levels of the formless realm, thinking they were liberated. So all of these things we read connect together so clearly. And if we know what it's talking about, we can see the profundity of it. We can see how you could get trapped in samadhi. You could get trapped in meditative absorption. And the bliss of it is very easy to get attached to. When you get to more and more subtle states and you have the pliancies and so forth that occur, it feels so good and seems so much like there aren't any more problems that you can think that you're liberated. And when we look at what's really going on, it's terrifying, because that being is just moving so quickly towards another rebirth, towards dissatisfaction, towards shucking off more bodies, towards birth, aging, sickness, and death, meeting with the unpleasant, separating from pleasant things, not getting what they want, and having a form again of suffering, mental and body suffering, the suffering of change and the suffering of suffering that they'll be thrust into once again because there's only been suppression. So we have to know what this all means, not because we need to be geniuses, because we don't want to screw up. And the way we don't screw our meditation up is by knowing what meditation is, knowing what the steps are, knowing clearly what emptiness is and what emptiness isn't. So we're not meditating on something that is nihilism or substantialism and spending our lives in something that's not a liberating path. Spending our lives in meditation that really isn't compassion, it's bias. And it's not even ripening anything. It's just attachment to the things we like. So we care about them because we like them. Only that the compassion we're trying to generate in the Mahayana is great compassion. There's lots of compassions out there. Non-harm's in the nature of compassion. But the compassion we're trying to generate is the one that's in the 7-point cause and effect. That is great compassion that has as its object of observation all sentient beings without bias. Even those ones we may not believe in even exist right now. In the hell and hungry ghost. Who knows? I've been convinced, but it's like a gray convincing. I didn't see it. But I believe so wholeheartedly in these beings that have presented the way reality is, that I say, this thing that, I can't see, that's so hidden to me. Because of these other things that the Buddha taught, like it says in Aryadeva's 400 verses, when we can't really believe in some of the things that the Buddha taught about the extremely hidden or the very hidden, look at the teachings on hidden, the slightly hidden, which we do need to use analysis and arrive at through correct sign, and we can get inferential valid cognition without having to rely upon someone's word for it. So emptiness and karma in general, we can realize through signs and reasoning. We don't need someone to tell us it's true and believe it out of blind faith. Some of these other, more hidden things, I don't know. Maybe you could see them if you got clairvoyance. I'm not sure how extremely hidden they are. That's not what I'm trying to get into. My point is that there's so much that the Buddha presented that we say, I'm not so sure if that's true. But we don't have to stay there. We can decide whether it's true or not by relying on the scriptures, seeing what the Buddha taught, cut, rub it, check it for accuracy, make a decision. The Buddha doesn't wash away the sins with water, doesn't remove our suffering with hands, can't give us his or her realizations, teaches the truth of suchness, and that's how we're liberated. So we need to see, is this suchness or not? Is this reality? Suchness means reality. Is this reality? Is what the Buddha taught reality? The Buddha can tell us it's reality, but, so can my neighbor can tell me something's reality. That doesn't mean that my neighbor or the Buddha's right until I see if it is. And then, once I see that it is, now I'm positing the Buddha's omniscience, so I believe it is. But Have I realized the emptiness? No. Do I have an inferential view of emptiness? No. So I'm like correctly assuming consciousness is it. So I'm assuming things correctly. We assume maybe they're correct. Some blind faith in there, but also some, inference in other things, assuming they're correct. But what does Pabunka Rinpoche say in that little short advice on how to practice the stage of the path? Boy, that's a dangerous place to be, kid, because that can change. You can start walking back from correctly assuming consciousness to doubt and jump right back into wrong view and not assume what's right is right. Assume what's wrong is right. That's scary. And that's why we come here on Thursdays and Sundays, hopefully, is to figure out how to get to that point where we have an incontrovertible understanding of this stuff. And that doesn't come about through blind faith. And that's why all these other things don't really work that well, because we don't know. But if we can arrive at something incontrovertible through inference and know beyond a shadow of a doubt, yeah, things are not objectively existent. They conventionally subjectively exist. They ultimately don't have this objective existence. There's no inherent existence, no intrinsic existence. If we can get to a place in our mind where we have this incontrovertible, like this understanding that we arrive at newly, that's correct. Suddenly we arrive at, for first moment, we have this new, incontrovertible understanding of emptiness that can occur. That's when we know we won't walk backwards from it, because we'll know it. And from there we could actually see emptiness. So what do we have to do that? We've got to get our minds calm enough and our minds smart enough to be able to have that union of calm abiding and special insight that allows us to then, because of the inference that we have that's incontrovertible, get to more and more subtle states of that union of calm abiding and special insight that we get where we're not even sure there's even like a sign left. That you can't even really tell in our minds the difference, the subject-object duality. And then eventually we directly realize the lack of duality of subject and object, the lack of inherent existence of all phenomena, the evenness, as Jeffrey Hopkins was saying the other day, that you realize the peace that exists, that's an attribute within the entity of all phenomena, this peace, this emptiness of inherent existence, this non-jagged nature that everything has, we will only arrive at if we know stanza 29 that we just read. Special insight, perfectly endowed with shamatha, completely conquers all afflictions. Knowing this and cultivating meditative concentration that transcends the four formless states is the practice of a bodhisattva. So now let's read the Heart Sutra. So we would have to get our minds, right, calm enough to be able to look at what this sutra means. What is Buddha talking about? No eye, no ear, no nose. But there is an eye that exists and a nose that exists. What's this middle way thing the Buddha's talking about? Buddha's not talking about nihilism. The Buddha's not talking about substantiality or permanence or some sort of like inherent existence in things. This solid nature. So what's the Buddha talking about? So I've got to get my mind calm enough to figure that out. And in order to get my mind calm enough to figure that out, I have to have ethical behavior. And that's why it's so important as we back towards what we're getting at in this great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment today. The ethics, we know, is the foundation, Nagarjuna says, for everything. The Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha of Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha of monks and a great gathering of the Sangha of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the Samadhi that expresses the Dharma, called profound illumination. At the same time, Noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajnaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Remember, you and all sentient beings are listening to this. Imagining the merit field and the space in front of you, so happy that we're reciting the Heart Sutra that expresses the ultimate reality whilst implicitly teaching all of the grounds and paths necessary for us to become Buddhas. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita should see in this way. Seeing the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form. Emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. So can you find emptiness without an object? No. There's no inherently existent emptiness. So in order for you to find emptiness, you have to have an object that's empty of inherent existence. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form. So we see this relationship between emptiness and dependent origination that's being so clearly taught, well, maybe not so clearly taught in the Heart Sutra, but so clearly identified by Jayang Gapi Lodru in the Heart Sutra teaching that Rinpoche so kindly gave us. And that so we know maybe a little bit about why form is emptiness, emptiness also is form. Emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics, there is no birth and no cessation, there is no impurity and no purity. There is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no eye dhatu up to no mind dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind conscious dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance up to no old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, and no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the Bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajnaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the three times by means of Prajnaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajnaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequal mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering, should be known as truth, since there is no deception. The Prajnaparamita mantra is said in this way: Teata on gate gate, paragate, parasangati, bodhi soha. Thus, Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajnaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family, thus it is, O son of noble family, thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajnaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Ngala jube nejo damba ne nguje duju ngai dudo jendru baba lama yi bushinzi ne sun kandro so la jase lo agasamara jeshandara samare be agasamara jeshandara. Agasamara jeshandara samare be di aton gati gati parasangati bodhiso baba gojisu jigai de bedoji she lobodoji mebodoji shewadoji jagi baji medu beji janji jeringori zo ageri junjaji juji wada medunu be jandandra wada tumbonjo tumba junjin bonzon zonjoji dashi de jandenda de lejo. We'll offer a perfect universe with sentient beings all having a good time, enjoying it in the utmost way, experiencing the most happiness. We're offering this perfect world as a request for teaching, imagining to the teacher that goes back to the merit field, basically to Buddha Shakyamuni and all those holy beings of the extensive deeds lineage, profound view lineage, the lineage of blessings. All of those holy beings, we trace through our lineage through, and we look at a family tree, family tree, we would see all of these holy beings, being so connected to us, and landing at the teacher, presently talking, and not because I have any kind of specialness. I had a teacher named Kensur Geshe Wandak, and I have a teacher named His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Geshe Dorje Damdu. So we So then you have that same blessed lineage, the exact same blessed lineage. So when you see, me sitting here, you just see the blessed lineage that you're part of, and the holy beings that I rely on, and as the great Bodhisattva Tome Zampo said, that these are the truths. These are the actual, what I'm speaking. I have no skill at really doing this, but I'm speaking truth, so I'm confident. So maybe I'm not saying it well all the time or lose my place, but what I'm saying comes from Kensur Geshe Wandak, which comes from a host of very holy lamas that were his gurus, including His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Trijung Rinpoche, Ling Rinpoche, Zong Rinpoche, these holy beings, Gen Lacha, Gen Uzer, Kensur Pema Jetsun, Shakar Gen Nima, all these beings I heard so much about, almost like I knew them, like when Rinpoche would talk about them, like they were in the living room with us, because he'd say Kensur Pema Jetsun, he'd just call Gen, Gen, like it means teacher, and he would just talk, just like Kensur Pema Jetsun, who we saw in his room, that black and white photo of his guru on his altar in his room at the Chenrezig Center. I felt like, I knew Kensur Pema Jetsun. I know Kensur Pema Jetsun. And you hear of the Shakar Gen Nima, and when Rinpoche would go, he went, to the hot springs with him. And it's almost like, and he said, I didn't have to pay. And it's almost like I was on that trip when I heard Rinpoche talk about it. And it's not because Rinpoche had such a great skill at writing or explaining or creating a scenario. It was just the lineage was so powerful that it just became like they were right there. It wasn't out of any special way he was putting it. It was just the power of the lineage. And some things are real explainable, and some things aren't so explainable. But that power, I always felt that presence of lineage that Rinpoche made clear was so, so important to us. We're so blessed. Never forget we have these 8 leisures. Do something about it. Take essence of this life. We don't have any of the 4 unfortunate states of the lower realms. The 3 unfortunate states of the lower realms. We have 4 fortunate states as a human, and we don't have that long life deity problem where we don't care. We're in a human basis where we can practice. We can become enlightened. We can become bodhisattvas. We can get renunciation. We can see emptiness. We can do that with this mind we have, and the time to start doing it isn't tomorrow when I have a day off, or isn't next year when I have a long vacation and can go into retreat. Rinpoche always said, all these people go into these retreats, but I don't know what they're thinking about. A squirrel can go into the woods. Well, what are they doing? So many animals live alone in the woods. Do they see emptiness? I don't know what they're thinking about. And it's funny when you read Chandra Rilpi Dorje's Remembering Mother. They're all saying they have these profound views, but I'm not sure what you're pointing at. What view? What are you pointing at? What's the object of negation? What are you meditating on? The time to do your retreat is now. Retreat your mind from non-virtue. Take a retreat. Take a step back from the non-virtues, the 10. Start there. That's holy practice. You don't have to wait until you can go somewhere away and be quiet and not look at people. The time to practice is right now. Fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers. Adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Sanje je danzo ji je nan la, janju badu dani jazu ji, dagi chu she ji bez Zonanje drola benje sanje druba jo zanje jananza ji janana janju badu danye jazuji dagi juje jipe zonanji drola benje sanje druba jo sanje jananza ji janana janju badu danye jazuji dagi juje jipe zonanji drola benje sanje druba jo. And now in English from the side of a student listening. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. May all of our motivations right now be secure that we're here in order to become Buddhas, in order to benefit every single sentient being. This is our motivation. If you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. If you're attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you're attached to self-interest, there's no bodhicitta. If there is grasping, you do not have the view. May this teaching be heard and understood in the language of all sentient beings. Okay. Here we are, so fortunate. I keep repeating this like a record, but it's just unbelievable. Among the billions of beings, humans, right? Just say billions of humans. What, 7 or 8 billion human beings now? How many of them are receiving instructions from a completely pure lineage of teachings which will show them how to have fearlessness and infinite happiness? How many of those beings will learn how to become the most reliable guide in the universe? Learn how to help everyone without bias. Because if we want to fulfill our needs in a complete way, we have to become a Buddha. We start there, Lama Tsongkhapa says. Don't forget this in the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment. You start at, because you got there with renunciation, a desire to definitely emerge from cyclic existence. You recognized that you don't want any of the types of suffering that exist, and you want to be free of fear. So you generate renunciation, a desire to emerge from the origin of suffering, which when we go trace it, we find the origin of suffering is a grasping at the I and phenomena as having some sort of objective existence. So from that renunciation of that origin of suffering and the wanting to not have suffering and wanting to be fearless, you say, wait, is there a better, some better? Is there something better? And that's where you start getting into the Mahayana, because you recognize that if you only have fearlessness, you only have the realization of the medium scope, the realization of a hearer, solitary realizer in an abiding nirvana, you haven't even done everything you can for yourself. You don't have bliss. You don't have the ability, you haven't matured all of your potential. You have gotten rid of the afflictive obstructions. They're not there. But the obstructions to omniscience, those cognitive obscurations, are still there. And if cognitive obscurations are still there, your potential's not met. You don't have bliss. And in order for that to occur, in order for you to step up from just wanting liberation for yourself, in order for the bliss to occur, you have to make a step up in the rung from just wanting happiness for yourself. There's a very, very strong connection between wanting happiness for everyone and your ability to have the ripening path that couples with wisdom that that makes the obstructions to omniscience go away. So there's a very, very big connection there to you wanting to cherish others more than you cherish yourself. And that gets rid of, it can be explained, in a very, very technical way. But that gets rid of that subtle stain that's left over. When you're in arhat and you're in an abiding nirvana and you've only fulfilled, thought about yourself, getting rid of the afflictive obstructions and not having suffering anymore, you still have the stain of the grasping and a stain of a self-cherishing attitude. Gross self-cherishing isn't there anymore once you're an arhat. It's not like this vehicle, that doesn't produce Buddhahood, that only produces abiding nirvana, has no love and compassion. That's preposterous. They actually have immeasurable love and compassion, but the object of observation isn't all sentient beings, and the purpose of their paths is just to liberate themselves. It's not for the sake of all of the beings. So it lands them in a place that's free of suffering, but not full of bliss, not completely ripened to that being's full potential. So we start with this desire to fulfill all of our potential, and then we hear the whole story. And if we have renunciation, we already have love and compassion that we in our minds to a degree. So in order to fulfill all of our needs, we have to become a being who can fulfill all sentient beings' needs, become the most reliable guide in the universe. And that comes from what? First, engaging in the virtuous activities that serve as the foundation for us to be clear-minded enough to really do some good. We try to fumble around in the world with the mess of our minds, and we give to charity here and there, and we do some good things here and there. But how much of that is just mixed in with our own desire to have the 8 worldly concerns fulfilled or not fulfilled? If we look at, getting a gift, not getting a gift, being, hearing nice words, not hearing nice words, being famous, not being famous, feeling good, not feeling good. I mean, how much of the good stuff we do, we think we're doing so nice, we're so nice, is just saturated with those 8 worldly dharmas. We have to ask ourselves that. And the way that we can start to use this mirror properly of the Dharma is to know what it says, to know what our starting point is. So today, we're on a really important section. Not that there's a more important section than another, but we're in the section on malice, harmful intent, translated a lot as. And when we look at the 51 mental factors, when you study mind and its functions and so forth, or low rig, you find that there's these 51 mental factors that are always accompany main minds, and there are 11 virtuous mental factors, and the 11th is non-harm, and it says that it's in the nature of compassion, this non-harming state. And there's a lot we're not going to get into the technicality of it and the details, but when we look at virtue, when we look at the ethics that abandons the 10 non-virtuous activity, just not doing it, right? Just because you walked by it and didn't kill it, maybe a little bit of it, but it's more of an actively this non-harm mind that doesn't kill it, if that makes any sense. It's not, someone could debate this, but there's an element of activity in this non-killing that takes place that is non-malice. And we see how in the Basu Bandhu's Abhidharma Kosh, it talks about from intention, from the mind, from intention comes the talking and the body moving around, and we see that you have an intention of malice, then you kill. Intention of harmful intent, and you kill. And I wanted to tell a story today before we get into the text itself, because I think that this really shows us. I think, the text's great, but watching Khenser Geshe Wandak really affected my mind more than any book ever did. And, I don't remember the year. It doesn't really matter. But Rinpoche was already living in the secondary apartment. So it was, after 2000, I had come back from India. don't know the year. But he came to me and said, I need a mouse house. And what are you talking about? You need like mouse traps, you have to catch a mouse. And he said, no. Many of you may have heard this before, but he said, I caught a mouse in a pot and it has a lid on it. And I said, okay, Rinpoche, how'd you catch a mouse in a pot that has a lid on it? And he said, well, for a couple of nights, I sat in the dark in the kitchen. There's been a mouse that was eating my flour bags open and grain rice bags, he showed me. And so I sat in the kitchen in the dark and I said, for how long? For how many days? Couple days. So and I don't know, I wasn't there, right? But in my mind, I see him like in the kitchen with like some peanut butter, just waiting to put this lid on the pot. And all the while, trying not to harm the mouse, because Rinpoche was very clear to us never to put out mouse traps or anything that would kill rodents, poisons. He'd always say, like, put medicine, put things that would distract him, keep everything super clean and put medicine down. Now we know he meant like mint and just things that rodents and pests don't like, put them around in different places as, a deterrent. Put out deterrents and keep everything clean, he would always say. So he had this mouse in a pot. So I come to find out, of course, he's, now he wants a house for it of some sort. So another student go and, Stasha, actually, we go buy this mouse, a glass thing and all the stuff you put in a mouse house for a hamster. And Rinpoche was so happy. It was like he had gotten a new house when he saw this thing. He was so overwhelmingly happy. We're talking about this mouse was like this big. This wasn't like pet store, like a little tiny, tiny mouse. So then we put it in there and he was so happy, set the thing up and put all the food, we bought hamster food. It's a little gray to me, this memory, but the lesson is not gray at all to me. It's like this. And then he was so happy. So the mouse was in it. And then the next day I came because, we would go all the time, to see Rinpoche. He said, I don't know, the thing's jumping up and it's banging the lid. And I'm afraid he's going to get back out. And I was like, why don't we just let him outside? We can't let him outside. There's cat, because in the back of the old center, if you remember, any of you, when you would pull up, there were cats all the time out back there. And Rinpoche, it was literally, I don't know what his mind looked like, but outwardly, it was like he was in the ER trying to make split-second decisions about this little mouse. And he was, talking to me like, well, we can't, if we take it outside, it's going to get eaten. And then, I don't know what to do. And I think it was summertime. If I'm not mistaken. It's not like it was cold out or anything. So he was like, all right, so let's tape the top down so it can't get out. It doesn't know any better, Rinpoche said. It doesn't know. It's just trying to get out. He doesn't know he's safe and we're just trying to help him. And then he said, animals, they're so dumb. We are trying to help them and they're trying to bite you because they have this ignorance. They can't even see sometimes this love and compassion that's so obvious right in front of their eyes. It's such a gross level because their ignorance is so blinding. We can't talk to them. We can't say, we're just trying to help you. They can't understand our language. Ninji, he said, the state of this poor suffering being. And at the time, I don't know that it's did what it's doing to my insides right now when I think about it. But that's 25 years later or something, 20 years later. So the Dharma should be doing that. You should be like, something should be occurring. Like, not like, oh, I became a Bodhisattva last week. No, but something should be occurring, a feeling. Something should be happening in there. So then we tape the thing down and then a couple days go by. He's eating the top. Like eating the top away of this cage. Now there's plastic drops that's broken off into the cage. Now Rinpoche is really like seemingly suffering. He says to me, I don't know what to do. The mouse is so unhappy. His mind is so tortured now. He's in jail. I put the mouse in jail. I've put the mouse into jail. But the cat's outside. But the mouse's mind's so much in jail. He's seeing the monk who put him in jail. And he's seeing humans. Is he gonna want to be a human? Is he gonna just have hatred towards humans? His mind is so disturbed. What do I do? So then Rinpoche finally decided, okay, in order to make this being happier, I think we have to bring it outside, Jeff. And we have to, let's put it somewhere. Let's make sure there's no cats. Let's go out there and make sure, before we do anything, like there's no cats out there, and let's try to get it into a spot that maybe it could find like a hole a cat couldn't get into. I mean, this was like a major, major production that went on. And so we finally released the mouse after Rinpoche did a ton of prayers in the Rinpoche Tantra stuff he would do that, right? I don't know. When he was doing it, because his eyes would turn into like a deity and he would do all this strange stuff. Maybe we had a little understanding of what was going on, some of us, but like he had the understanding and we were just like grabbing it for moments that made us keep going, maybe. But what it tells me today on this Sunday in February is that Rinpoche was willing to put that much mental effort into caring for a mouse. And we talk about the teachings. Pabonka Rinpoche talks about what occurs when you realize these 6 causes. He gives us indicators of what would go on. You'd see a being and be like, oh, mama. Oh, you were so kind to me. Oh, I need to repay your kindness. I want to give you happiness. I don't want you to have suffering. I'm gonna do something about that. Wow. He was doing something about that. And all the while, he's thinking about the future life of this one being. That's what a bodhisattva does. And then we can mimic this behavior. We can maybe not put poison out. Let's try to not harm. Let's try to have our non-harm be in the nature of compassion. Wanting sentient beings to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And there's so many beings who, doesn't mean you have to say Buddhist. There's so many kind beings who engage in this in this world. I only tell this story to show how you mimic Khenser Geshe Wandak and what kind beings there are out there like him. Yesterday morning, we let Kala outside. Remember how cold it was. And she's going absolutely berserk. I run outside, and there's a large raccoon in a ball against our foundation. It's in cold, and in the leaves. That it's kind of the dogs in the summer. They make this hole they can lay in to cool off. Well, this critter, obviously, when the wind chill was 20 below, got right next to the foundation. May have some other problems too, but whatever. Got right next to the foundation. And tried to be free of its suffering somehow, seeking happiness. And so we let the dog in. Now what do? 4 pit bulls we can't let outside. We can't just let them out the front door. So now, we have to do something. We have a suffering being. We have all this. We have a lot going on. So Lori puts out on Facebook our call to help. just to see it. We're just expecting. I'm expecting, as I heard she did it, people being like, kill the thing, hit it with a rake. I got a gun. I'm just, call, and we know that, animal control, they have to apparently usually kill it. So it didn't take long at all. But there was like helpers, angels that just came out of nowhere. Doesn't matter their names, because they do work that is sometimes everyone doesn't agree with, helping rodents and so forth, pests as some people would call them, but Khyentse Geshe Wandak would call them his kind mother. What's a pest? Your mother's a pest, your father's a pest, your dearest loved one, the person who was so kind to you and helped you when you were so vulnerable, is a pest. Who's a pest? Are you a pest? Should you be put? Who's the pest? We're all equally important. And other people who haven't discovered this magical Buddhism truth feel that way too. There's so many kind beings in this world. So we were told like how to do it. And, I'm ignorantly not fearful of wild animals. So we got it into a dog crate and brought it into a warm place. And now after the teaching, we're bringing it to someone who is either going to check it, make sure there aren't any issues, who's a vet type person, doesn't matter who or what, and going to give it shots and stuff if it's sick, and, going to take it to stay in a sanctuary, or if it can be released and it's healthy, released. It may be pregnant as well. We don't know if it's a boy or a girl. His name's Frosty. Lori's daughter named it Frosty, and has always wanted a pet raccoon. So we are not going to have a pet raccoon. You can't have a pet raccoon in Connecticut. So anyone who's listening and is on the phone right now, we aren't intending to do that, and nor is anyone. If it's going anywhere, it'll be a wildlife sanctuary. It's not going to someone's house to be like a cat. But there's really a lot of kindness out there. And, I spoke with others not so kind, who would not have given the advice that the kind people in the world gave and that Khyentse Geshe Wandak gave us. And that's when the rubber meets the road. Are we able to really care for others when it's inconvenient? Are we able to have non-bias? Non-bias isn't, may all sentient beings over there, I always say on Pluto, have happiness and be free from suffering. No, it's the ones that are right in our face, that sometimes smell, sometimes nip, sometimes yell at us, sometimes kick dirt in our face. Those are the ones we're supposed to have non-bias towards. That's when we see, is this affecting our mind or not? And I have to say that, yes, it is. My mind went haywire trying to figure out how to not have a dog get harmed and an animal get harmed and an animal get warm, and my mind for just a moment got out of Jeff, and I saw it doing this care, and I saw how much different it was than, God, I really want that thing so badly. I get these glimpses of the feeling of what someone like a being of like Khyentse Geshe Wandak would feel like all the time, and how like the mind couldn't operate simultaneously with wanting to harm and a feeling like that, and how feeling like that made my mind feel like that a little more, even towards the people who were saying like, natural selection, bro. Even feeling like, wow, people are under the control of ignorance and delusion, and even having it flash in my mind, even though I judged it. But at that flash, which would have normally just been only judgment, may have flashed because I let my mind let go of cherishing myself for a second, and maybe it got just a little bit bigger that day. That's how you move towards these ideas like all beings are as important as me. Cherishing myself is no good. Cherishing others is good. Loving others is good. Having compassion for others is good. Putting them before myself is good. They're so kind to me. These beings have been so kind. How could I do anything but that? In my previous lives, they've been so kind to me. In this life, everything I enjoy is because of others. These teachings, when they affect your mind, you get the lightning bolt of it affecting your mind. And this whole thing just brought Rinpoche right back in the room. And the mouse story. And I didn't even think of the mouse story like, oh, I better save this thing because of the mouse story. It's really strange that I was thinking about it later, and it was like a blessing came over my mind. You know, like when you get the butterflies and you're not really sure why. It was like, oh, thank you, Rinpoche. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming into my life. Thank you to all these kind lamas who come into our lives. Some of us are so reckless. We're so reckless. Trying to be less reckless. And you came into our lives and showed us how to be not reckless at all. How to get rid of recklessness altogether. And it's through step by step, moving away from recklessness, moving towards mindfulness and introspection, moving towards the ethics that abandons the 10 non-virtuous activities, moving towards those pradamoksha vows, moving towards the bodhisattva vows, moving towards those tantric vows, and being a person who actually gets those vows. These 10 non-virtues that we talk about are the foundation for the individual liberation vows. The individual liberation vows, the pradamoksha vows, those 7 lifetime vows, the 2 of the householder, the 2 of the novice monk and the nun, the probationary nun vow, and the 2 of the fully ordained monk and nun, those vows, those are lifetime vows that you take because you want to emerge. They're called individual liberation vows because you have renunciation. You take these vows. You haven't, according to Vinaya, you're not allowed to read a monk or nun vow until you take it. You're saying, I have complete faith in Buddha because I've recognized Buddha as the reliable guide. I desire to definitely emerge from cyclic existence, so I take a householder vow. So I take a monk or nun vow. It's not like, oh, can I take the 5 vows? Can I take the 5 householder vows? I really want to. I want to be a great Buddhist, and I hear great Buddhists take layperson vows. No, people who take layperson's vows take them. These are holy vows found in the medium scope that are taken because you want to get out of cyclic existence. You want to be free from the 8 sufferings, 6 sufferings, 3 sufferings. You want to get rid of the origin of suffering. You want to rely upon a path that leads to cessation. So therefore, you take these vows because ethics is the foundation of everything. And if you have this holy, holy motivation of renunciation, then you could actually get bodhicitta because you know what suffering is. You know how crappy every type of suffering within cyclic existence is. You know that even those beings in the peak of cyclic existence, in meditative absorption, in samadhi, those gurus, those yogis who think they're liberated, aren't. You know that they have pervasive compounded suffering and that they will be forced into another set of contaminated aggregates by afflictions, contaminated karmas, and their seeds. and the affliction driving everything is the grasping at the I and phenomena as being truly established that gives rise to self-cherishing attitude. I say, oh, I am self. You say, I am self. You are other. But there's no inherently existent self or other. Are we all self? No, there's not one consciousness. There's a distance between me, seemingly, my mind. There seems to be a distance between that and you. Couldn't be this one thing. There seems to be this distance. We have the same nature of emptiness. But conventionally, subjectively, there's this distance taking place. So fortunate. Let's read a little bit from... Let's read Tsongkhapa first. We've got a couple of things to read today. But let's read some Tsongkhapa first. What am I doing? Oh, okay, I remember. Sorry, I was in my head going, but Jeff, you said in your mind you were going to read Buddhapalita and Baba Vega's life story. It's funny how our minds can just be distracted right in the middle of talking to you. You know? Mirror of the Dharma. Keep it up all the time. Okay, so malice. Okay, so the basis, perception and afflictions are the same in the case of offensive speech. So we went through that. The motivation is the desire to do such things as strike others, thinking such thoughts as how nice it would be if they were killed, bound, their resources ruined, either naturally or by another person. The performance is having that thought. Some sort of malice, harmful intent towards another being. The opposite of not wanting them to be harmed, because you have this ahimsa, right? Non-harm, non-violence. That's in the nature of compassion. It says in that, and then the previous head of dialectic school, the founder, Genlonson Gyatso Rinpoche, says that this non-harm is a mind that's disturbed with the idea of sentient beings, not that having suffering and having the causes of suffering. It's a mind that doesn't want that. It's like an active mind of some sort that's disturbed, meaning like it doesn't feel right. This non-harm doesn't feel right about beings who are suffering, who have the causes of suffering. So non-harm, non-violence is an active thing, an active virtue. So the malice is the opposite of that. The performance is having that thought. The culmination is a determination or decision to do such things as beating. Moreover, it is complete if the following 5 attitudes are present, and incomplete if they are not. The 5 are: an attitude of hostility driven by a reifying apprehension of the characteristics of the causes of harm and the phenomena related to them. I want to harm them. I want to strike them. They shouldn't have this. I'm going to take away what they have. I hope that something bad happens to them tonight, etc. An impatient attitude of not being patient with those doing harm to you. Oh, wait a second. Oh, you mean when someone's like yelling at me and I think I'm about to hit them, the thing that makes me yell back at them is malice? Wait, I thought I was such a great person a minute ago. The thing that makes me yell back at them is part of these 5 parts of malice? Ooh, maybe I am doing this. A resentful attitude based on repeated improper attention to and mindfulness of the causes of your anger. So, mindfulness is not forgetting and paying attention to and paying attention to it. Something like not forgetting it, paying attention to it. And this improper mental kind of attention is thinking, yeah, this person is really bad, and man, who are they to be yelling at me? They need a punch in the mouth. They need somebody to set them straight. I think our malice comes a lot, or, it could be towards the animal I'm talking about, right? Yeah. An envious attitude, which thinks how nice it would be if my enemy were beaten or killed. Wait, there's like a little bit of envy that's kind of like covetousness in there, but it's not. Wait. This is a really complex thing I'm going to have to untangle. Not harming, not having a harmful intention, not having a mind that's ready to go, ready to harm. From intention comes our actions of our body and our speech. Abhidharma Kosh. We see so clearly. We have this intention that says, man, I'm going to hit, and then I hit. I'm going to yell at you, then I yell. And this is why we have to search into our mind and stop it before the punching, before the yelling. And it's easier not to punch because the consequences are greater. And yelling at the top of our lungs in public, maybe easier to slow down. But what about that? Clenching our teeth and talking, or saying things very passive-aggressively to someone. That's the same stuff. Passive aggression is the same thing. Saying something passive-aggressive, you don't have to scream at someone or punch them in the face. That can come from harmful intent. Divisive speech, look at it. Lying, all of these things. Killing, adultery even, stealing. Yeah, harsh words, all of this stuff. We see it all arises from our mind. It's our mind that's got to be fixed. The only thing that can bring another yelling person to come yell at me is me to yell back. Have a moment of anger towards them, and I'll create a habituation. And then in my future life, I'll get it again, and hopefully I'll have studied enough Dharma not to react, at least enough to stop my mouth and hands. An attitude which is dominated by a lack of shame about your malice, and obliviousness about the determination to be free of its faults. Some people are just oblivious. They just malice all the time out. Yell, scream, kill. Just oblivious. So it isn't just, you only have this if you know about it. This oblivious. When we look at ignorance in Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment and the 12 links, it talks about ignorance. Ignorance related to karma and its results. Ignorance related to the nature of reality. That ignorance, being oblivious. Whether it's confusion or a state of not knowing, just oblivious. And that's why samsara is such a mess and keeps going around and around and around. Go around in cyclic existence over and over and over again. We suffer so greatly. All sentient beings suffer so greatly because this truth hasn't been incorporated. And as soon as we incorporate this truth, we're on our way to never having to have suffering again and be the most reliable guide in the world if we get rid of the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience by engaging in the three principal paths of renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness. Attitudes of simple malice are as follows. To the extent that you reflect, someone has harmed me or is harming me, and think about how to bring harm to whoever is doing it and did the harm. All this is malice. Whoa. So I'm just thinking about, man, that person, and I hope they get theirs sometime. We see how our minds become so habituated, and it can be such a normal state of mind. We feel justified in thinking this way. We feel justified politically when we think about some political figures to hate them and literally hope that they're carted off to prison and fed bread and water the rest of their life. I do this sometimes. I do this less because of Kensei Geshe Wandak. And you know how you really can start to do this less? How do you know an affliction will arise? You still have it. You have ignorance. Ignorance will bring about attachment. You're too close to the object. If politics or fill in the blank, your neighbor, this person on your Facebook feed is causing you to want them to be harmed or causing you to not want them to have happiness and the causes of happiness, you are too close. Too close. And you have the third improper attention. We say improper mental conduct. When Rinpoche taught it, improper mental conduct. You're thinking about it. You're giving yourself justifications and reasons, and you're building, you may have started thinking, man, this person's really bad. I can't get over what a bad person they are. And they did this, and they did that, and this, and man, I can't stand people like that. I can't believe there's people like that in this world. Man, that person really, they do a lot of harm to other beings. I hope they get theirs, and if they don't get theirs, I don't know. It's just what a jerk. That person's inherently, objectively existent. They're just a terrible person. I'm just seeing my view, and I have who cares? Not everybody's as important as everybody else. Clearly, I see here they're not. Jeff says that everybody's important. Shantideva said everybody's equally important, but I don't know. Let's say 98%, 99% are equally important. This person can't possibly be equally important. I hope that, somehow or another, somebody comes and gets them and stops them. If I could, I would do it. If I could get that, if no one was looking and I could get away with it, I'd go in there in the middle of the night and I'd bring that person and I'd lock them up and I'd put them, somewhere where they could really learn, what's right from wrong. I hope the police just come in and you get the point, I think. How improper mental conduct grows it. It starts out as, man, I didn't know he was really like that. And then grows into this massive thing where you're ready to maybe in some cases commit a crime. So you can see how somebody who's created sometimes the most heinous crime came from, they didn't get rid of the affliction that made them do it yet. They were too close to the object, and they thought enough about it that they decided it made sense to kill or to scream and yell or say something that, defamation of character. These criminals who only have the same thing I do, who have the same mind ready to jump out and be awful that I do. Maybe in this life, I have some blessing of some imprints ripening and making my experience of mind not as violent, but I have all the recipe in my mind. If I don't connect with a pathway that's going to last into my next life, if I'm not going to remember this pathway, and this has just all been like a play, it's been like a movie of characters, a Dharma movie that really didn't create any lasting change, that didn't make me die with no regrets, that didn't make me on my deathbed have some sort of continuity, some sort of way to look forward and not backwards. Because usually when we're dying, everyone's looking backwards. I saw my life pass before me. If you're a practitioner, you'll see your future and you'll be staring and making sure you're going there. Big indicator. How will I make sure I connect with my future? How in my future life do I make sure I'm still a Dharma practitioner? If you're attached to this life, you're not a Dharma practitioner. What does that mean? It sounds so harsh. It sounds like, just jerks who go live in the wilderness. No. It means that when you die, and all you can do is look back and you're so, oh my God, I'm going to lose my friends, I'm going to lose my family, I'm going to lose my material things, I'm going to lose this body. Your mind won't be ready. You won't be ready. My mind won't be ready. And let alone just peaceful. Okay, so there's a step. Let's just get it to peaceful. Peaceful doesn't a director. My mind can be as calm as the ocean. But if I'm not directing at my death, directing my next illusion, directing what will appear objectively real next, so that I can eventually stop seeing things appearing as objectively real when I become a Buddha, while I'm seeing conventional and ultimate reality. Yeah, how do I make sure that's the case? It starts to get a little scary when I ask you that question, does it not? How do I make sure there's continuity? How do I make sure this just wasn't me being an actor, acting out something? How do I make sure that my view of emptiness isn't just pointing at objective existence and I'm just trying it on? So easy to misunderstand emptiness and make emptiness like a creator God. But emptiness is empty. What does that mean? And if I don't understand what that means, I'm really going to have a hard time loosening up and directing. And if my motivation hasn't transcended the thoughts of this life, then I'll be looking back so terrified. This is why we start at the small scope. Because generating this desire to emerge from cyclic existence altogether has to start from understanding, wow, I could be a slug in an hour. I could be a mouse in an hour. The only thing separating me right now, potentially, between, okay, say separating Jeff from suddenly believing I'm a mouse and no longer knowing Jeff, is that I haven't passed, I haven't died. And there hasn't been a mouse birth that I believe is me. And that's the highest of the lower realms. Or you could, it depends on who's interpreting it, but in terms of the torment and suffering, it's the highest shot in the lower realms I have. And the Buddha said, what? Beings that will go from the higher realms to the lower realms are like atoms in the universe, and beings that will go from the higher realms to the higher realms are like the atoms on a fingernail. Beings that will go from the lower realms to the lower realms are like the atoms in the universe. Beings that go from the lower realms to the higher realms are like the atoms on a fingernail. Mouse Jeff is most likely, but least likely in terms of numbers. There's more hell beings than hungry ghosts. There's more hungry ghosts than animals. So this imaginary thing we think of hell and hungry ghosts that we don't really believe, when we start to study it and say, oh yeah, that's a lot bad, a lot worse than these things that I can see with my eyes, it gives us a little bit of gas for our tank of effort and makes us see that there's such a bigger picture than the little picture that I create in my mind that is Jeff and Jeff's. And this picture of other that's not as important. We have to do it sooner or later. We all will become Buddhas. But the problem with it is saying, oh, I'm just going to get my kicks in this life. And then the problem is these lower realms. And the problem is birth, aging, sickness, death, meeting with the unpleasant, separating from the pleasant, not getting what you want, and these appropriated aggregates, and the uncertainty of cyclic existence, and the insatiability of cyclic existence, and the rebirths within cyclic existence, and the shucking off bodies in cyclic existence, and going to the higher realms and the lower realms, primarily going to the lower realms, as we're told, in cyclic existence, and not having companions through that quest. Do we want to again and again have the suffering of suffering, the gross suffering of the mind and the body, that torment? Do we want the suffering of change, that temporary happiness, those things we think are happy makers that are contaminated and then have a self-destruct mechanism in them that eventually will turn into a state of suffering in some way or another? That car rusts that I had to have, and now I'm attached to getting another car, and I hate this car. It went from being the greatest thing in the world to the worst thing in the world, and something else went to being the greatest thing in the world. And my mind believes it. My mind just keeps getting tricked like a fool. I keep seeing this happen. I keep seeing this insatiability. I keep seeing these things change, go from something I had to have to something I don't want. But I don't get the point. I don't see the bait. I don't see it as the bait that keeps me in cyclic existence. And I certainly don't see higher forms of meditative bliss, if I ever got it, if I had it right now, as bait that would keep me in some way not understanding that I would again be forced into a set of aggregates because of pervasive conditioned suffering, pervasive compounded suffering that we know so much about because Khyentse Geshe Wandak taught us. Being forced again and again and again into a contaminated set of aggregates beyond our control. We have no control. And the Buddha said, what? Lack of freedom is misery, is suffering. Forced again and again and again. No independence into these aggregates because of ignorance. Contaminated karmas and their seeds and afflictions. Again and again and again into suffering. So we're talking about not harmful intention-wise, no malice intention-wise. So let's read from the king of non-malice, non-harmful intent, Shantideva, about the full acceptance, chapter 3. We could read really any chapter and we're going to find love, compassion, bodhicitta, of course, the guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life. But I picked this chapter this morning to read, and then we'll end. I just encourage everyone, please change your mind with the Dharma. Do the Dharma. Don't be around the Dharma. The Dharma is cool culture. Tibetan culture is neat. It's also was a medieval situation. It wasn't all so neat. You don't have to become Tibetan. Just become the mind of a Tibetan like Rinpoche who was a bodhisattva. And you don't need to be a Tibetan or Chinese or Indian or Mongolian or from Singapore or from Sri Lanka or from Thailand to make that happen. You just have to be a sentient being with a mind. And if you have that, you have Buddha nature, and you can make that happen. Shantideva is giving advice to all sentient beings. Not to sentient beings that aren't like us. All sentient beings, because all sentient beings are exactly like us in one respect, that we have maturing Buddha nature and natural Buddha nature. Our minds are empty of inherent existence, and all of this stuff that we think we are, we're just wearing like a costume. I'm wearing costumes, you're wearing costumes, they're wearing costumes, everyone's got on costumes, grasping at I and mine. So important. Full acceptance of the awakening mind, chapter 3 of Shantideva's Bodhisattva Charya Avatara, Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, Shunju. Gladly do I rejoice in the virtue that relieves the misery of all those in unfortunate states and that places those with suffering in happiness. I rejoice in that gathering of virtue that is the cause for the Arhat's awakening. I rejoice in the definite freedom of embodied creatures from the miseries of cyclic existence. Hold on one sec. I talk too much. I rejoice in the awakening of the Buddhas and also in the spiritual levels of their sons and daughters. And with gladness, I rejoice in the ocean of virtue from developing an awakening mind that wishes all beings to be happy, as well as in the deeds that bring them benefit. With folded hands, I beseech the Buddhas of all directions to shine the lamp of Dharma for all bewildered in misery's gloom. With folded hands, I beseech the conquerors who wish to pass away to please remain for countless eons and not to leave the world in darkness. And thus, by the virtue collected through all that I have done, may the pain of every living creature be completely cleared away. May I be the doctor and the medicine, and may I be the nurse for all sick beings in the world until everyone is healed. May a rain of food and drink descend to clear away the pain and thirst and hunger, and during the eon of famine, may I myself change into food and drink. May I become an inexhaustible treasure for those who are poor and destitute. May I turn into all things they could need, and may these be placed close beside them. We see these practices in here. Shantideva is talking about the giving and taking, the Tonglen practice, where we imagine ourselves turning into wish-fulfilling jewels that go to every single sentient being and fulfill all of their mundane and super mundane needs. Shantideva was so kind to us to write these things down. And Geshe Umzala Geshe Aga said, this is the book. This is the book for him that at the end of his Geshe degree, really, His Holiness the Dalai Lama said, make the pages black with your fingers. Wow. Without any sense of loss, I shall give up my body and enjoyments, and well as my virtues and of the 3 times for the sake of benefiting them all. By giving up, sorrow is transcended, and by giving up all, sorrow is transcended, and my mind will release the sorrowless state. It is best that I now give everything to all beings in the same way I shall do at death. Having given up this body for the pleasure of all living beings by killing, abusing, and beating it, may they always do as they please. Although they may play with your body and may make it a source of jest and blame, because I've given it up to them, what is the use of holding it so dear? Therefore, I shall let them do anything to it. That does not cause them any harm. And when anyone encounters me, may it never be meaningless for them. If in those who encounter me a faithful or an angry thought arises, may that eternally become the source for fulfilling all their wishes. May all who say bad things to me or cause me any harm, and those who mock and insult me, have the fortune to fully awaken. May I be a protector for those without one, a guide for all travelers on the way. May I be a bridge, a boat, and a ship for all those who need to cross water. May I be an island for those who seek one, a lamp for those desiring light, and may I be a bed for all those who wish to rest, and a slave for all those who want to slave. May I be a wishing jewel, a magic vase, powerful mantras, and great medicine. May I become a wish-fulfilling tree and a cow of plenty for the world. Just like space and the great elements such as earth, may I always support the life of all boundless creatures. And until they pass away from pain, may I always be the source of life for all the realms of varied beings that reach into the ends of space. Just as the previous Sugatas gave birth to an awakening mind, and just as they successfully dwelt in the Bodhisattva practices, likewise for the sake of all that lives, do I give birth to an awakened mind, and likewise shall I too successfully follow the practices. In order to further increase it from now on, those with discernment who have lucidly seized an awakening mind in this way should highly praise it in the following manner. Today my life has borne fruit. Having well obtained this human existence, I have been born in the family of the Buddha. I am now a child of the Buddha. Thus, whatever actions I have done from now on must be in accord with that family. Never shall I disgrace or pollute this noble and unsullied race. Just like a blind man discovering a jewel in a heap of rubbish, likewise, by some coincidence, an awakening mind has been born within me. It is the supreme ambrosia that overcomes the sovereignty of death. It is the inexhaustible treasure that eliminates all the poverty in the world. It is the supreme medicine that quells the world's disease. It is the tree that shelters all beings, wandering and tired in the birth of conditioned existence. It is the universal bridge that leads them to freedom from unhappy states of birth. It is the dawning moon of the mind that dispels the torment of the disturbing conceptions. It is the great sun that finally removes the misty ignorance of the world. It is the quintessential butter from the churning of the milk of Dharma. Amazing. For all those guests traveling on the path of conditioned existence who wish to experience the bountiness of happiness, thus will satisfy them with joy and actually place them in supreme bliss. Today, in the presence of all the protectors, I invite the world to be guests at a festival of temporary and ultimate delight. May gods and demigods, may gods and anti-gods all be joyful. If you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. If you're attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you're attached to your own self-interest, there's no bodhicitta. If there's grasping, you do not have the view. Enthused by great compassion, you taught the immaculate Dharma to dispel all perverted views. To you, the Buddha Gautama, I pay homage. So fortunate. We didn't get to Buddha Palita today. Well, next week. I encourage you to read the stories, the life stories, the liberation life stories of all the Nalandapandits and all these holy beings that we hear about. And that will encourage you to become like them. Thanksgiving mandala offering. Beautiful, pure environment offering with everyone happy in it. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate all this virtue. Any mistakes that I have made, I'm sorry. If I have said something wrong because of my ignorance, or I didn't say something so well, or I lost my train of thought, and that caused you to, not receive something that you should have, I apologize. And the faults are my own. They're not the faults of any of the lineage, that's for sure. May anything wrong I said be erased from your mind. And any faults maybe that you had by not listening well, maybe you have a leaky pot or a contaminated pot or an upside down pot. May that all be purified and it, zap your mind into, because your ears heard it. So maybe it'll bring it back and tighten it up. So through this prayer to Vajrasattva, imagine that the beautiful merit field is there. All the holy gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas with Vajrasattva. And imagine that there's a rain of white, red, and blue light rays and nectars that are forming white ohms, red ahs, and blue hums, and are showering down and transforming in the form of white ohms your impure body into pure body, raining down red ahs, going into your throat, transforming your speech into pure speech, and blue hums raining down and transforming your mind, going into your heart, into the hum at your heart, and transforming your mind into pure mind. And imagine that these om, ah, hom, white, red, blue, respectively, are dissolving into you, and that making a purification of anything that went on in this teaching wrong, but also just purify your body, speech, and mind in general. It was very interesting, right? When Rinpoche told me he was going to die, he went into this posture like Vajrasattva. It was very interesting. He started making it this very, like he had a bell and dorje in his hand, and went into this like very interesting. So just imagine that the yidam, the lama is inseparable from the yidam. Om Benzasata Samaya Manubalaya Benzasata Zeno Majija Dile Meva Zudakaya Meva Zubukaya Meva Anuratu Meva Savasiti Mebraja Savakama Suchi Mekitam Chiankuru Ha 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 ho Bhagavan Sava Tatagata Benzama Memoka Benzabava Mahasamaya Sava Ahom Ve. May we always be protected by Palden Lama and all the Dharma protectors, but Palden Lama, Rinpoche said, is our Dharma protector, who is the emanation of Tara. And once again, Rinpoche is inseparable from Tara, inseparable from Palden Lama. Jarama 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 Jinjakalar Jamorama Judacha Jinjar Hong Johong Jarama 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 Jinjakalar Jamorama Judacha Jinjar Hong Johong Jarama 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 Jinjakalar Jamorama Judacha Jinjar Hong Johong Jarama 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 Jinjakalar Jamorama Judacha Jinjar Hong Johong Jarama 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 Jinjakalar Jamo Rama Vajudacha Jinjar Hong Johong Jarama 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 Jinjakalar Jamorama Judacha Jinjar Hong Johong Jarama 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 Jinjakalar Jamorama Judacha Jinjar Rilo Hong Johong. May Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings please stay in this world until samsara's end. Mi meze we tuchin chenrezi. Dre me jame wambo jame yande bomali jimze zawe da kanjing ebizo jinze gobalos and drabi jala zowa de. Make special dedications for David Hemingway. He was a very crucial, important member. Everyone's important, right? All sentient beings are important, but he's spent a lot of time with the Tibet Center. A lot of people are praying for him. He passed away at 4:50-ish yesterday at NYU. Or I'm not sure if he was in the hospital. I don't want to say that for sure, but passed away yesterday. So please keep David Hemingway in your prayers, and all beings, in Rosario Caputo, of course, in your prayers. All beings, so many people pass. And so many people didn't intend to die the day that they died. We see the very sad story during the winter storm. I don't know her name, I'm so sorry, but lost a baby because a tree fell on her car. And it was not that day the mother thought that she would lose her baby, and it wasn't that day the baby thought it would lose its life. Like a flash of lightning in the dark, our lives can just go away. And just make prayers for all those beings who are in the intermediate state. Make prayers for all of those beings who are suffering. May they be relieved of suffering somehow by the might of this teaching, through the power of this truth. May their suffering ripen on me. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness. All-powerful Avalokiteshvara Tenzin Gyatso, may you stay until samsara's end. In all our lives, may we never be separated from Khensur Geshe Wandak. May we create all of the causes necessary, accumulate everything necessary to be able to meet with this holy, holy being who has showed us the stages of the path to enlightenment. And whatever form we meet him or her in, whether it's in this normal worlds, may they emanate to us. If we need a bridge, may they bring a bridge. May he or she. And when we become Arya Bodhisattvas, may we meet with that pure Sambhokaya and be taught that beautiful place with those 5 qualities. And when we become a Buddha, in whatever form we need to take, may we help Khensur Geshe Wandak and all the holy, holy beings bring every single sentient being to a state of fearlessness and bliss. Thank you, everyone. I hope this meant something to you. I hope this helps your Dharma practice in some way. And yeah, it just amazes me so much over and over and over again. And now listening to some of Jeffrey Hopkins' teachings on identifying Mama, a song of this realization, Jancha Rilpi Dorje. And we're so fortunate that we have these very, very profound teachings to try to grapple with in our world. Please change your mind this week. Thank you.